Hello everybody. In this video we're going to be looking at how we compare GDP across time and thinking about business cycles. So generally over time we're going to be using real GDP and actually we're in the next video we'll be talking about real GDP per capita, but to start out with we'll just talk about real GDP and how we use this to compare economic growth over time. In the short run, we have what are called business cycles, and these are just the general fluctuations of the economy as the demand for goods and services fluctuates. So here I'll show you just a quick example of a business cycle. We're moving up and down over time, and each of these components has a name. So on our way up, this is called an expansion. We're going to write all this down in a second. And at the top of an expansion, right before a recession hits, we have the peak. This gray bar is a recession. It's actually the Great Recession after the subprime mortgage crisis and financial crisis that followed. Great Recession. And that is this downward contractionary period. That's called a recession. If it's particularly bad, it's called a depression. And then at the bottom of the recession, right before the next expansion, we have what's called the trough. And then we can carry on with another recovery and expansion period. Okay, so let's write down all of these items in a list. First we have expansion, which are periods of economic growth. Periods of economic growth. At the top of an expansion, before there's a recession, it's the peak. The highest point of output before a recession begins. The highest point of output before a recession begins. And then we have the recession. These are periods of economic decline. And if it's particularly bad, we call it a depression. The rule of thumb for what defines a recession is generally 2 quarters of negative real GDP growth. So basically 6 months of negative real GDP growth. That's the rule of thumb, but I will say there are exceptions to that rule. Most recently, during the coronavirus pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic started a recession, which was designated a recession before there were actually 2 quarters of negative real GDP growth, because it resulted in such a strong and stark downturn quite unexpectedly. But for most other recessions, this is the rule. And then at the bottom of the recession, before the next recovery, is the trough. And this is the lowest point of output in a recession before a recovery begins. The lowest point of output in a recession before a recovery, or we could just call it back to the expansion, begins. Okay, and so there we have it. Expansion, peak, recession, trough. there's our business cycle right there. The Library of Economics and Liberty has a lot more information. If you go out there, you can find a lot of links and articles and more to read up about that. But we're actually going to stop this video off right here, quick video. And in the next video, we're going to pick it up where we compare GDPs not across time, but across geographies. So I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks.